You ever sit in traffic at the end of a long day, engine still running, watching that red light hang there just a little longer than it should? And for a second it hits you. You did everything right today, didn't you? You showed up. You answered emails. You dealt with people you didn't even like. You smiled when you didn't feel like it. You checked every box they handed you. And yet somehow, when you open your banking app later that night, it still feels like the numbers are playing a joke on you. Not a loud joke either. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't make you angry right away, just tired. Because deep down, you already know what it's saying. It's saying, do it all again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Same effort, same routine, same slow crawl forward that never really feels like forward. That's the part nobody says out loud. We were all taught this simple equation growing up. Work hard, stay consistent, good things happen. Clean. Logical. Easy to sell to a kid who hasn't paid a bill yet. But somewhere between your first rent payment and your third unexpected expense in a single month, that equation starts to crack. Not break completely, just enough to make you question it, because you start noticing things. Small things at first, like how the guy who barely seems busy somehow takes vacations twice a year, or how someone younger than you is making decisions in a room you're not even invited into. Or how certain people don't look stressed about money, not because they're lucky, but because they're playing a different game entirely. And that's when the discomfort sets in. Not panic, not jealousy, just this low, constant awareness that something doesn't add up, that maybe effort alone isn't the currency you thought it was. You start replaying your days in your head, the meetings, the tasks, the hours traded like chips at a table where you don't even know the rules. And the more you think about it, the clearer it gets. Most people aren't underpaid because they're lazy. They're underpaid because they're easy to replace. That's a hard sentence to sit with. It doesn't sound nice. It doesn't feel fair. But look around. Really look. Jobs that require presence but not precision. Effort but not leverage. Those are the ones that keep people stuck. Because if someone else can learn what you do in a week, then no matter how hard you push, you're always negotiating from the bottom. And life has a way of reminding you of that at the worst times. A rent increase, a medical bill, a broken phone when you really didn't need one more thing going wrong. Suddenly, all that hard work doesn't feel like progress. It feels like maintenance, like you're running just to stay in place. And the strange part is, nobody pulls you aside to explain this. There's no moment where someone older, wiser, sits you down and says, "Hey, the system you believe in? It's missing a piece." Instead, you figure it out in fragments, in late-night thoughts, in quiet comparisons you don't admit out loud. In that split second when you see someone else's life and realize they're not working harder than you, just differently. That's where the real question starts forming. Not the surface-level stuff like, how do I make more money? But something sharper, more uncomfortable. Why does my effort not translate the way I thought it would? And once that question gets in your head, it doesn't leave easily. It follows you into your routine, into your morning coffee, into those moments where you're scrolling without thinking, watching people talk about success like it's something you can download in 10 steps. Most of it sounds like noise. You can tell, too polished, too rehearsed. But every now and then, there's a line, a simple one. Something like, it's not about how hard you work, it's about what you're working on. And that line sticks, because it doesn't try to impress you. It just sits there, quietly challenging everything you've been doing up to this point. You start noticing patterns. The people who seem ahead, they're not just putting in hours, they're building something, a skill, a system, a way to make their time multiply instead of just pass. And suddenly, your 12-hour day doesn't look the same anymore. It looks heavy, inefficient, like carrying water in your hands instead of using a bucket. Same effort, different outcome. And that realization? It's not exciting. It's unsettling. Because it means if nothing changes, next year might look exactly like this one. Same stress, same limits, just older. That's the quiet fear most people don't admit. Not failure, not even struggle, just repetition. The idea that life doesn't collapse, it just loops. And you wake up one day realizing you've been busy the whole time, but never really moving. So you sit there, maybe in your car, maybe on the edge of your bed, maybe staring at a screen you've checked too many times already. And the question comes back again, sharper this time. What exactly am I getting paid for? Not in a philosophical way, in a real, almost uncomfortable way. If someone took away your current job tomorrow, what part of you would still hold value? What could you walk into a room and offer that not everyone else can? And if the answer feels unclear, that's where things start to change. Not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly. Because once you see the gap, you can't unsee it. And that's where the story really begins. Marcus didn't look like someone standing at the edge of change. If you saw him on a random Tuesday afternoon, leaning against the glass counter of that small electronics store, you'd probably forget him before you even stepped back out into the noise of the street. He wore the same dark polo every shift, the kind that never quite fit right, no matter how many times you washed it. And he had this habit of nodding a little too quickly whenever a customer spoke, like he was trying to move the conversation along without being rude. The store itself sat on a corner where traffic never really stopped, just slowed enough for people to glance at their phones or stare ahead, thinking about bills, deadlines, or whatever was waiting for them at home. Inside, the air always carried that faint mix of plastic packaging and overused air conditioning, and the fluorescent lights hummed quietly above, like they had something to complain about but never would. Marcus knew every shelf, every product code, every small trick to reset a frozen device, or convince someone they needed a slightly more expensive option. Not because he loved the job, but because repetition does something to you after a while. It carves patterns into your mind until you move through tasks without thinking, like your body figured it out before you did. His day started early, not out of ambition, just necessity. Alarm at 6:30, snooze twice, sometimes 3 times if the night before stretched too long. Coffee made fast, usually too hot to drink right away. So it sat there while he checked notifications he didn't care about. Messages, promotions, updates, noise mostly. By 7:15, he was out the door, stepping into a street that already felt like it had been awake longer than him. People moved with that quiet urgency you see in cities, not running, but never really relaxed either. Everyone heading somewhere, chasing something, or maybe just trying not to fall behind. The bus ride was always the same, a mix of tired faces, headphones in, eyes half open, each person wrapped in their own routine. Marcus usually stood, one hand gripping the overhead bar, swaying slightly with every turn, staring out the window at buildings that looked identical after a while. Sometimes he'd catch his reflection in the glass, just for a second, and there was this brief moment of recognition, like seeing a version of himself he hadn't really thought about in a while. Then the bus would stop, doors would open, and that moment would disappear into the shuffle of people getting on and off. Work itself didn't demand much creativity. Customers came in with problems that followed predictable patterns. Phone not charging, screen cracked, battery draining too fast. Marcus would listen, nod, ask a few questions, and then guide them toward a solution that balanced what they needed with what the store wanted to sell. There was a rhythm to it, a script, almost. And once you learned the script, you could get through a full shift without ever really engaging your brain. That's the part that started bothering him, though he couldn't quite name it at first. It wasn't the job itself, it was the feeling that he could disappear for a week, come back, and nothing would have changed. Same conversations, same problems, same outcomes. Like the world inside that store existed on a loop, untouched by whatever was happening outside. Lunch breaks were short, 15 minutes if it was busy, maybe 20 if things slowed down. He'd sit in the back room, scrolling through his phone while eating something quick, usually whatever was cheapest nearby. That's where he first started noticing the gap, though he didn't call it that yet. It showed up in small ways. A video here, a post there. People talking about building skills, making money online, creating something of their own. At first, it all blurred together. Too many voices saying too many things, most of it sounding like shortcuts or empty promises. Marcus wasn't naive. He'd seen enough to know that not everything online was real. But every now and then, something slipped through the noise. Not flashy, not loud, just different. One night, after a shift that felt longer than it should have, he got home, dropped his bag by the door, and sat down in that same cheap chair that creaked every time he leaned back. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every small sound. The hum of the fridge, the distant traffic, the occasional footsteps from the unit above. He opened his laptop, more out of habit than intention, and started scrolling. That's when he found it. Not a video with dramatic music or bold claims, just a simple thread. Plain text, no design, no branding. The title caught his eye, not because it promised anything outrageous, but because it asked something he hadn't considered before. It talked about skills, not jobs, not degrees, skills. Things you could learn, refine, and carry with you, regardless of where you worked. It broke them down in a way that felt practical. Writing that influences decisions. Editing that keeps people watching. Understanding data well enough to see patterns others miss. Using tools, new ones, like AI, not as a replacement, but as leverage. Marcus leaned forward a little, the chair creaking under him, eyes scanning each line slower now. There was no hype in the words, no urgency, just a quiet confidence, like whoever wrote it didn't need to convince you, they just needed you to pay attention. He read it once, then again, not because it was complicated, but because something about it felt important. Not in a dramatic, life-changing way, more like a small shift in perspective, the kind that doesn't hit you all at once, but stays with you longer than you expect. At first, he dismissed it, closed the laptop, stood up, stretched, told himself it was just another piece of internet content. But the next day, at work, something was different. A customer came in asking about a product, and as Marcus explained the features, he caught himself thinking, not about the product itself, but about the way he was presenting it. The words he chose, the order he used, the small pauses between sentences. It was subtle, but it was there. That thread from the night before had planted something. A question, maybe, or a curiosity. During his break, instead of scrolling mindlessly, he went back to it. Read it again, this time slower, paying attention to the details. It wasn't just listing skills, it was showing how they connected to real outcomes. How a well-written sentence could lead to a click. How a well-edited video could hold attention just long enough to make someone care. How understanding numbers wasn't about math, but about seeing what others overlooked. Marcus didn't decide anything right then. No big moment, no sudden commitment, just a quiet acknowledgement that maybe there was something here worth exploring. That night, instead of watching random videos until he fell asleep, he searched for more information. Not courses, not shortcuts, just examples, real ones, ads that worked. Videos that held attention, emails that made him pause before deleting. He started noticing patterns, the way certain phrases pulled him in, the way some content felt effortless to watch, while others lost him in seconds. Days turned into a kind of experiment. Work stayed the same on the surface, but inside, Marcus was paying attention in a way he hadn't before. Every interaction became a small lesson. What made a customer hesitate? What made them decide? What made them trust him enough to take his recommendation? It wasn't about the job anymore. It was about understanding behavior. He didn't tell anyone, not his coworkers, not his friends. There was something about it that felt too early to share, like speaking it out loud might break whatever fragile momentum was starting to build. So he kept it to himself. Small steps, small observations. Nothing dramatic, just consistent. Weeks passed. The routine didn't change, but the way he moved through it did. The store was still the same. The city was still the same. But Marcus, he was starting to see things differently, and that difference, quiet as it was, began to shape everything that came next. The strange thing about change, real change, is that it rarely announces itself. There's no clean break, no cinematic moment where everything before and after is clearly divided. For Marcus, it came in fragments, quiet adjustments layered on top of a life that, from the outside, looked exactly the same. He still woke up at 6:30, still rode the same bus, still stood behind that same counter, under those same humming lights. If you asked anyone at the store, they'd tell you nothing had changed about him. Same guy, same routine, same predictable rhythm. But inside, something had shifted, and it wasn't loud, it was precise. He started noticing how often people didn't really know what they wanted when they walked into the store. They'd say they needed a new phone, or a charger, or headphones. But if you listened closely, that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was frustration, or confusion, or sometimes just the need to feel like they were making the right decision in a world where everything felt slightly overwhelming. Before, Marcus would respond with information, specs, prices, comparisons, the kind of stuff you're trained to give when you're trying to be helpful. But now, he slowed down. He listened longer, asked questions that weren't on the script, and then he adjusted, not the product, but the way he framed it. Instead of saying, "This one has better battery life," he'd say, "You won't have to think about charging this halfway through your day." Instead of listing features, he painted outcomes. Small shift, same product, different response. And the reactions changed. People nodded more, hesitated less, trusted faster. It wasn't magic, it was alignment, matching what he said to what they actually cared about, even if they couldn't articulate it themselves. That's when it started becoming clear. This wasn't just about selling. It was about understanding how decisions get made. And once you see that, really see it, you can't go back to the surface level. Outside of work, that awareness kept growing. He'd watch videos differently now. Not for entertainment, but for structure. Why did this one hold his attention for 5 minutes straight, while another lost him in 10 seconds? What was different about the pacing, the tone, the way the first few seconds were constructed? He'd pause, rewind, take mental notes. Same with ads, emails, even conversations. Everything became data, but not the kind you store in spreadsheets, the kind you feel, the kind you recognize after seeing it enough times. And here's where the twist really settled in. The realization that most people weren't stuck because they lacked opportunity. They were stuck because they were focused on the wrong layer of the problem. They chased tasks instead of understanding the system behind those tasks. They learned what to do, but not why it worked. Marcus started seeing it everywhere. Coworkers complaining about low pay, but never questioning the nature of the work itself. Friends talking about needing a better job, but not a better skill. People putting in more hours, thinking volume would compensate for lack of leverage. It wasn't that they were wrong, it was that they were incomplete. They were playing checkers in a game that rewarded chess, and no one had told them the rules had changed. One evening, after closing, Marcus stayed back a little longer than usual. The store was quiet, lights dimmed slightly, the hum softer now without the constant movement of people. He leaned against the counter, looking around at the rows of products he'd memorized months ago. Same place, same job. But the way he saw it now, it felt different. Not smaller, not bigger, just clearer. This wasn't where he was stuck, this was where he was training. That distinction mattered more than he expected, because once something becomes a training ground instead of a trap, your relationship with it changes. You stop resenting it, you start using it. Every interaction became practice. Every customer, a chance to refine how he communicated, how he guided decisions, how he translated features into meaning. And the results followed, quietly at first. His sales numbers went up, but that wasn't the part that caught his attention. It was the consistency, less randomness, less reliance on luck, more control, predictability in a way that didn't exist before. That's when the deeper realization hit. Not all skills are equal. Some keep you busy, others give you leverage. And the difference between those two, that's where everything shifts. A busy skill ties your income to your time. You show up, you get paid. You stop, it stops. Simple, clean, limited. A leverage skill, though, that's different. It allows one unit of effort to produce multiple units of outcome. One message reaching thousands. One piece of work generating value long after it's done. That's not about working more. That's about working in a way that compounds. Marcus didn't have the language for it at first, but he felt it. That subtle but undeniable difference between effort that disappears at the end of the day and effort that stacks. Late nights became less about random consumption and more about intentional practice. He'd take a product from the store and write different ways to describe it, not for anyone else to see, just for himself. Testing angles, testing tone, seeing how small changes in wording shifted the feeling of the message. Some versions felt flat, others clicked. You could feel it even reading it back. That moment where a sentence just lands right. It wasn't instant progress. Some nights felt like nothing moved forward. But even on those nights, something was happening underneath. Pattern recognition sharpening, instincts forming, a kind of quiet calibration that only comes from repetition. And slowly, the outside world started reflecting those internal shifts. Opportunities didn't show up like grand invitations. They appeared as small openings. A friend asking for help with a post, someone needing feedback on a piece of content, minor things. Easy to ignore if you weren't paying attention. But Marcus paid attention now. He said yes, not because he needed the money at that point, but because he needed the reps. Each small project became another layer of understanding. What worked in theory didn't always work in reality. What seemed obvious sometimes fell flat. And occasionally, something unexpected would perform well, forcing him to rethink assumptions. That feedback loop, action, result, adjustment, became addictive in a quiet way. Not exciting, not dramatic, just engaging. Like solving a puzzle that keeps changing shape the more you understand it. And through all of this, one truth kept surfacing, again and again. The world doesn't pay for effort, it pays for outcomes. And outcomes are driven by understanding. Not surface-level knowledge, but deep, practical insight into how things actually work. That's the part most people skip. They want the result without sitting through the confusion, the repetition, the slow build of clarity that only comes from doing something long enough to see beyond the obvious. Marcus didn't skip it, not because he was special, but because he didn't rush it. He stayed with it long enough for the fog to clear. And once it did, everything else started to make sense in a way it hadn't before. The same city, the same streets, the same crowded intersections. But now, underneath all that movement, he could see the patterns, the invisible threads connecting attention, decision, and value. And that awareness, that quiet, steady understanding, that was the real turning point. Not a new job, not a sudden breakthrough, just a shift in how he saw the game he'd been playing all along. There's a certain kind of quiet that only shows up when things start to make sense. Not loudly, not in a way you can point to and say, this is the moment, but more like a slow exhale after holding your breath longer than you realized. For Marcus, it didn't come with celebration. No raised arms, no dramatic exit, no speech about finally making it. It showed up on an ordinary evening, the kind that used to feel identical to every other evening before it. Except now, it didn't. He was sitting in a small cafe just a few blocks from his apartment, the kind of place most people walk past without noticing. The sign outside flickered slightly, one letter dimmer than the rest, and inside, the lighting leaned more toward shadow than brightness. A couple of tables were occupied, someone tapping away on a laptop, another person stirring a drink long after the sugar had dissolved. Nothing remarkable. And yet, Marcus sat there like it mattered, like the moment itself had weight. In front of him was a cup of coffee he hadn't touched in a while, a thin layer forming on the surface, forgotten as his thoughts moved somewhere deeper. His phone lay face down on the table. That alone would have been unusual a few months ago. Back then, it was always within reach, always lighting up, always pulling his attention in small, fragmented pieces. Now, it stayed still more often, not because he forced it, but because it stopped feeling necessary. He leaned back slightly, the chair making a soft sound against the floor, and looked around. Not at anything specific, just around. People moved, conversations blended into low background noise. The door opened and closed with a quiet rhythm. Life happening, as it always does. But the difference now was in how he related to it. There was a time when every sound like this carried a kind of pressure, the sense that time was slipping, that he was behind, that everyone else was moving faster in ways he couldn't quite measure. That feeling had a way of tightening your chest without you noticing, making even stillness feel like failure. But sitting there now, that pressure wasn't there. Not gone completely, just quieter, manageable. Like something he understood instead of something that controlled him. He picked up the cup, took a small sip. It had gone lukewarm. A few months ago, that would have annoyed him. Another small thing not going right. Now, he barely reacted. Set it back down. Let it be what it was. That's when it hit him. Not as a thought, but as a recognition. He wasn't chasing the same things anymore. Before, everything had a kind of urgency to it. More money, more progress, more signs that things were moving in the right direction. It was always about the next step, the next improvement, the next visible result. And because of that, nothing ever felt enough. Even small wins passed too quickly, replaced immediately by the next thing to worry about. But somewhere along the way, that shifted. Not because he lowered his expectations, but because he changed what he measured. It wasn't about speed anymore. It was about clarity, understanding, control over something specific, something real. He thought back to the early days, those nights sitting in that cheap chair, staring at a screen, trying to make sense of concepts that felt just out of reach. The frustration of not seeing immediate results, of questioning whether any of it was actually leading somewhere. That part had been heavier than he expected. Not physically, mentally. The kind of weight that doesn't show up on the outside, but follows you through your day, sitting quietly in the background of everything you do. And yet, that was the part most people never stayed for. They'd try something new, feel that discomfort, that lack of immediate reward, and then drift back to what was familiar. Not because it was better, just because it was known. Marcus didn't avoid that discomfort, not intentionally. He just didn't leave. He stayed with it long enough for it to change shape. Because confusion, if you sit with it, eventually turns into understanding. But that transition, it's slow, and it doesn't announce itself when it happens. You just wake up one day and realize something that used to feel complicated now feels obvious. He looked at his hands resting on the table, fingers relaxed, no tension. Another small detail that would have gone unnoticed before. There was a time when even sitting still felt like wasted time, like he should be doing something, anything, to justify the moment. Productivity had become this invisible pressure, shaping how he valued every hour. If it didn't produce something measurable, it felt like a loss. But now, he could sit, think, let time pass without needing to prove anything about it. That wasn't laziness, it was control. And control, that was the real shift. Not over everything, life doesn't work like that, but over how he engaged with it, what he focused on, what he ignored, where he placed his effort. The noise hadn't disappeared. The world was still full of people chasing attention, pushing urgency, turning everything into something that needed to be done now. But he didn't respond to it the same way anymore. He could see it for what it was, signals, not commands, suggestions, not obligations. That distinction, it freed up space, mental space, the kind you don't realize you're missing until it's there. A notification buzzed softly from his phone. He glanced at it, then looked away. Whatever it was, it could wait. That simple choice, barely noticeable from the outside, carried more weight than it seemed. Because it meant he wasn't reacting automatically anymore. He was choosing. And that choice, repeated enough times, reshaped everything. His work had changed too, though not in the way people usually expect. He wasn't working more hours. If anything, he was more deliberate about where his time went. Fewer distractions, fewer empty tasks, more focus on things that actually moved something forward. The kind of work that required attention, not just presence. And with that came a different kind of fatigue. Not the draining, end-of-day exhaustion from doing too much meaningless activity, but a quieter tiredness, the kind that comes from thinking deeply, from solving problems that don't have immediate answers. It wasn't easier, but it was cleaner, more aligned. He remembered a conversation from a few weeks earlier, sitting across from someone who had known him back when everything felt stuck. They asked him what changed. Not in a curious way, more like they were trying to find a shortcut, something they could apply without going through the same process. Marcus had paused, not because he didn't have an answer, but because the answer wasn't simple. "I just started paying attention to different things," he said eventually. It sounded almost too simple, but that was the truth. Not a secret strategy, not a hidden opportunity, just a shift in focus from what was obvious to what actually mattered. Back in the cafe, he let that memory pass, not lingering on it too long. Outside, the streetlights had come on, casting that familiar glow on the pavement. People moved through it, some fast, some slow, each carrying their own version of the same questions, the same pressures, the same quiet calculations about where they stood and where they were going. Marcus watched them for a moment, not with judgment, not with comparison, just observation. He knew that feeling, the constant movement, the search for something better without always knowing what better meant. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel pulled into it. He wasn't ahead of it. He wasn't above it. He was just outside of that particular urgency. And that space, that small distance between himself and the constant need to catch up, that was where the calm came from. Not because everything was solved, not because there were no more challenges ahead, but because he understood something he didn't before. That progress isn't always loud. It doesn't always look impressive. Sometimes it looks like this. Sitting in a quiet cafe, coffee gone cold, nothing urgent demanding your attention, and realizing that the person you were a few months ago wouldn't recognize how you see things now. And maybe that's enough. Not forever, but for this moment. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need. You don't really notice the moment when a lesson settles in for good. It doesn't arrive like a headline or a quote you can screenshot and save. It shows up quietly in the way you start making decisions without second-guessing yourself the way you used to. Marcus didn't wake up one day thinking he had it all figured out. There was no clean finish line where everything suddenly made sense and stayed that way forever. What he did have was something more useful, a kind of grounded awareness, the kind that doesn't get shaken every time something unexpected happens. And that awareness came from something simple, almost boring if you say it out loud. He stuck with one thing long enough to understand it beyond the surface. Not long enough to feel good about it. Not long enough to impress anyone. Just long enough to stop being confused by it. That's a different kind of milestone. Most people don't aim for that. They aim for results they can show. Money, titles, visible upgrades. And there's nothing wrong with those, but they come later. What Marcus built first was internal. A shift in how he approached problems, how he looked at value, how he decided where to put his time. That's the part nobody claps for. Nobody sees it happening. But it's the part everything else depends on. He still had bills, still had responsibilities. Life didn't suddenly become easier in the way people imagine. There were still days that felt off, moments where things didn't go as planned, situations that tested his patience in ways that had nothing to do with skill or strategy. But the difference now was in how he moved through those moments. Before, setbacks felt personal, like proof that he was doing something wrong or falling behind. Now, they felt informational, something to observe, adjust, move past. That shift alone removed a weight he didn't realize he had been carrying for years. Because when everything feels like a judgment, you move carefully, hesitantly. You avoid risks, avoid mistakes, avoid anything that might confirm your worst assumptions about yourself. But when things become data instead of judgment, you move differently, faster in some ways, freer. Marcus didn't rush into scaling everything or turning every opportunity into something bigger. That wasn't the lesson he took from his experience. If anything, he became more selective, more intentional. He understood now that not every opportunity is worth taking, not every path leads somewhere useful, and not every busy schedule is a productive one. That kind of restraint, it's underrated. People talk a lot about doing more, pushing harder, maximizing every minute, but rarely do they talk about what to ignore, what to say no to, what not to chase. And that's where most time gets lost, not in lack of effort, but in misdirected effort. He had seen that version of himself before, the one who filled every gap in the day with something, anything, just to feel like he was moving forward. But movement without direction, it doesn't take you very far. It just keeps you busy. And busy can feel a lot like progress if you don't look too closely. Sitting there in that cafe, or walking home through streets that hadn't changed, Marcus understood something that didn't need to be said out loud. It's not about becoming a completely different person. It's about refining the one you already are, sharpening how you think, clarifying what matters, letting go of what doesn't. The external changes follow that. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. And steady, that's more reliable than fast. If you asked him what someone should do, he wouldn't give you a list of 7 things or 10 steps or some structured plan that promises a specific outcome. He'd probably pause for a second, the way people do when they're trying to give you something real instead of something rehearsed. And then he'd say something like this: pick one thing that actually has value in the real world. Not something that sounds good, not something that's trending, something that solves a problem people are already paying to solve. And then, stay with it. Longer than you think you should, longer than it feels comfortable, long enough to move past the stage where everything feels confusing and into the stage where patterns start to appear. That's where the shift happens, quietly, gradually. And once it does, you won't need constant motivation. You won't need reminders to keep going, because it stops feeling like effort in the way it used to. It becomes part of how you operate. That's the difference most people miss. They think discipline is about forcing yourself to act. But real discipline, it comes from understanding. When you see clearly why something matters, you don't need to push yourself as hard to do it. It just makes sense. And things that make sense are easier to repeat. The world outside will keep moving the way it always has. New trends, new tools, new ways to get distracted. That doesn't stop. If anything, it speeds up. But underneath all of that, the fundamentals stay the same. Attention still matters. Value still matters. Understanding how people think, how they decide, what they respond to, that doesn't go out of date. Marcus didn't chase every new thing that came along. He paid attention to it, sure, stayed aware. But he didn't let it pull him away from what he was building. Because once you've experienced what it feels like to go deep on something, to actually understand it, you become less interested in starting over from scratch every time something new appears. Depth over novelty. That's a choice. And it compounds over time in ways that aren't immediately visible, but become undeniable later. If there's one thing that ties all of this together, it's this. Your current situation isn't as fixed as it feels. It might look stable, predictable, even limiting. But underneath that, there's room to shift. Not everything at once, not in ways that get noticed right away, but in small, consistent adjustments that change how your time translates into value. That's the real game. Not working more hours, not waiting for the right moment, just changing the relationship between what you do and what it produces. So if you're sitting somewhere right now, maybe not in a cafe, maybe just on the edge of your bed, or leaning back in a chair after a long day, and there's that quiet question in your head about whether things could be different, don't ignore it. Don't drown it out with noise or distractions. Sit with it for a minute. Ask yourself honestly, what you're building that holds value beyond where you are right now. Not what you're doing, what you're building. And if the answer isn't clear yet, that's fine. It doesn't need to be. Clarity comes after you start, not before. Just pick a direction that makes sense and give it more time than you think it deserves. That's where most people drop off, right before things start to connect. And if you want more conversations like this, not loud, not rushed, just real observations about how things actually work, you already know where to find them. Just don't be the guy who hears it, nods, and then goes right back to the same loop tomorrow.